1:01, so we will kick off and others will continue to join. So a good day to everybody. Good morning in parts of the country and good afternoon in other parts of the country. My name is John Reid and I chair LPC, and for my sins, I'm the moderator on some of the webinars. I'm the moderator for today's webinar. There is a Q&A and a chat function in the Zoom application. Please use those as our presenters go through the session for today, the content for today, and we'll provide time for Q&A at the end of the forum. You'll also find when the presenters' pictures come on the screen that there are QR codes. Two times you will see the presenters and their images, and there's a QR code which you can snap and be able to connect if you ever need to. The focus for today is the utilisation gap in most offices across Australia. And what we mean by the utilisation gap is we mean a mismatch between current and future business requirements and the leased arrangements that commercial tenants, office tenants have entered into. And this has caused a mismatch in the utilisation. Essentially, one could say that the premises are underutilised. The next slide is the agenda for today, which gives us an indication of how this topic is going to be tackled. So we'll start with introductions. Presenters will introduce themselves and the two companies that are presenting today. The second is we'll deal with the question, is there a utilisation gap? It really doesn't make sense to go through the rest of the agenda if we haven't established that there is a utilisation gap. The third, what problems result from the utilisation gap for lessees and businesses? What is driving the utilisation gap today and into the future? How to close the utilisation gap? XY Sense will give some very useful content and solutions in relation to closing that utilisation gap, very much driven from a data perspective upwards. And then LPC will deal with the same question, how to close the utilisation gap, and dealing it with more from a tenant advisor perspective downwards, if I can use that expression. And then we'll close off with a Q&A. So I'll hand over to Adrian now to introduce himself and LPC, and then the rest of the presenters will follow, and XY Sense will introduce their company as well.
Thanks, John, and great to be here today. So my name's Adrian Gerber. I'm a Director of Tenant Advisory and Lease Management at LPC based in Melbourne, with over 20 years experience in managing transactions and lease portfolios.
Hi everyone, my name is Rebecca Pelling. I have close to 20 years experience in delivering workplace projects and lead our project services offering at LPC.
Hi everyone, my name is Rebecca Waldron. I'm the Workplace Insights Manager and Customer Success Manager at XY Sense. Looking forward to sharing some of the insights today.
Thank you. And you do notice that we have a couple of Rebeccas online today. So in the Q&A and the chat, if you have a question raised and it's addressed to a Rebecca, just say Rebecca P or Rebecca W, and we know who you are speaking to. So back to you, Adrian, for a snapshot on LPC.
Thank you, John. So representing the occupiers at the core of everything we do. LPC was founded back in 1993, and over the last 3 decades, we've grown into one of Australia and New Zealand's leading independent tenant-only property businesses, with offices and representation across Australia and New Zealand. What does that mean in practice? It means we work exclusively for tenants and occupiers, never landlords, across every stage of the property lifecycle. Our team advises office, retail and industrial clients, drawing on deep market knowledge and strong industry networks to secure the best outcomes. But we don't see property as just bricks and mortar. We see it as a business tool, a way to strengthen your brand, attract and retain talent, engage customers, drive sales, and ultimately support profitability. That's why before we talk about space, we first talk about business. We're proud of the reputation we've built by always acting with integrity and delivering independent, high quality advice. At LPC, we are in every sense the tenant's advantage. Next slide, please. Next slide. Yep. So when it comes to property transactions, tenants can often find themselves at a disadvantage. And that's like what we like to show here with this barometer. On the left-hand side, it's very tenant unfriendly. Wrong location, wrong premises, wrong terms. Unfortunately, this is where too many occupiers end up if they don't have the right representation. Our role is to shift that needle as far to the right as possible, securing the right location, the right premises, and the right terms. That's how we deliver tenant-friendly outcomes. Now, once you've signed a lease, the job doesn't stop. Leases need to be actively managed, not just filed away. That means never entering into a bad lease in the first place, but also making sure you never miss a critical date, never overpay, and never miss an opportunity to renegotiate or optimise. And of course, compliance with IFRS 16 is part of that discipline. So whether it's at the front end with transactions or throughout the life cycle of the lease, our goal is simple: protect the tenant's position and ensure the property is working as a business asset, not a liability. Rebecca P., I might now hand over to you to talk about our project services offering.
Thanks, Adrian. So before introducing project services, I thought I'd start by sharing a few words of wisdom, which you can see on the screen, from Steve Jobs. If you define the problem correctly, you almost always have the solution. Whilst I'm pretty sure Steve Jobs didn't specifically have commercial property projects in mind at the time, the message still holds. So what we've designed on the screen are the problems that our project services team typically help our clients solve. And there are two problems which are relevant to today's discussion, which we've highlighted in orange. The first is an unclear workplace or utilisation strategy. And the second, which is related, is fit outs that are not fit for purpose. I think this is a good segue for Rebecca W. to now introduce XY Sense.
Thanks, Rebecca P. So for those of you who may not be familiar with us, XY Sense is a smart sensor platform. We deliver powerful workplace analytics designed to help workplace leaders make informed, data-driven decisions. We're deployed in over 28 countries and support over 70 enterprise customers to help tackle some of those exciting opportunities and challenges that we see in workplace. Next slide, please. So our technology provides real-time insights into how the workplace is being used and engaged with. This enables organizations to optimize their workplaces, improve employee experiences, and adapt with confidence to the evolving world of work. So just quickly on touching on how we do this, XY Sense provides privacy-preserving workplace sensors, so live data feeds and intuitive analytics to help teams better plan, use, and monitor their office spaces. This includes using our area, entry, and presence sensor to help understand utilization, which is all accessible through our analytics software so that this information is easily understandable as well.
So is there a utilisation gap? If we take a look at this screen, you can see that some of the statistics, and as XY Sense will demonstrate with their data later, yes, there is a utilisation gap, with space being underutilised and excess occupancy costs being incurred. So what problems result from a utilisation gap? Having ascertained that there is a utilisation gap problem, let's shift to what problems we're solving for clients. The first is a mismatch between space and business needs. Many organisations are paying too much for space or the wrong type of space relative to how it's actually being used. They might have rows of workstations sitting empty while collaboration rooms are always full, or they simply don't know how often their space is used or by how many people. That lack of alignment is a problem we help make visible and then fix. The second problem is poor location relevance. If the office is hard to get to for staff, poorly connected to transport, or inconvenient for clients to attend, attendance and engagement are going to suffer. Location strategy is just as important as the fit out itself. The third is financial inefficiency. Underutilised space is expensive. You're still paying rent, outgoings, and operating costs, whether a desk is occupied or not. We help clients reduce wasted spend and reallocate those resources more effectively. Then we have lease constraints. A lot of companies are locked into leases that no longer suit the way they work today. The lack of flexibility to right size or reconfigure without penalties creates real operational pain. This is where strong lease negotiation and portfolio strategy are critical. We saw many of those examples after the pandemic, which is still an issue for some occupiers today. Finally, there are missed opportunities. Many organisations don't capitalise on the chance to consolidate, repurpose or right size. They might miss cost reductions, they don't future-proof their leases, and they lose the opportunity to reduce emissions and improve ESG performance. By addressing utilisation, we're not just solving an immediate space issue, we're unlocking long-term benefits that go well beyond real estate. So Rebecca P, did you want to start off by talking about what is driving the utilisation gap?
Sure, thanks, Adrian. So the starting point, of course, was COVID-19. The pandemic proved at scale that people could work remotely. What began as an emergency response has now created a lasting shift in expectations. The shift accelerated hybrid working. Employees discovered the value of flexibility, balancing days in the office time with remote time. Hybrid isn't just a passing trend, it has quickly become the default mode. The challenge is that many workplaces simply don't match this new way of working. For instance, spaces are designed for one-to-one staff to desk allocations and often a focus on large front-of-house client meeting rooms, which are now often underutilised. Today's workers need a balance of quiet focus areas, technology-enabled collaboration zones, and social spaces. Add to that commuting time and cost. Staff are asking themselves, why should I spend an hour each way to sit at a desk I could have at home? Technology has also removed many barriers. Video calls, digital whiteboards, instant messaging, all of these make remote collaboration seamless and accessible from anywhere. At the same time, employees have built routines around well-being and caregiving responsibilities, whether it's childcare, schooling, or elderly care. Remote and hybrid models make that integration possible. And of course, the talent market is driving this too. Flexible work is now a baseline expectation for many employees. It's not a perk, it's part of the package. So ultimately, the office is not providing a compelling why. Putting these together, and it's clear why office utilisation remains so far below pre-pandemic levels. Rebecca W, I think I'll hand over to you now, discuss the XY Sense solution and how you can close the utilisation gap.
Awesome. Thanks, Rebecca P. So across Australia and New Zealand, $29 billion is spent annually on corporate real estate. This is often the second highest cost for most organisations after salaries and is one of the least accurately reported metrics for return on investment. So when we consider what we saw in our data, which is reporting a 40% utilisation rate, that is $11 billion wasted on real estate spend, which is not in use. So to get this data, at XY Sense, we collate over 200 billion data points across 28 countries and 55,000 office spaces per year. We bring this together into an industry report called the Workplace Utilisation Index, which we publish biannually. This covers both global and regional trends in workplace data. In our recent publication, I thought we could go through some of the themes that we've seen recently. So overall, global workplace utilisation has climbed to an average of 40% since March 2020. A few key dynamics have affected this shift. So the first is an increase in return to office requirements, resulting in more people in office. And the second is that organisations have had more opportunities to right-size their real estate as well. Delving into this, there are a few specific days which are showing high utilisation. This is probably unsurprising for most people, but this is concentrated around that midweek section. So Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays, where we're seeing peak utilisation in the office. What is interesting is that we've actually seen an upwards trend for Mondays with an average of 39% utilisation and still only 28 utilisation for Fridays. So what this is creating is a bit of a stark difference in the workplace where 3 days of the week we're seeing very decently utilised space, but then 2 days a week is showing low utilisation. So this is quite a tricky challenge for a lot of workplace teams to deal with. So more specifically, meeting rooms become a very large conversation point, especially when when workplace teams are trying to right size for peak days. So what we've seen in the data is that 40% of meetings are 4 to 6 person meetings. Interestingly, when we compare some of these statistics to meetings involving 7 to 9 people, that's only 13% of meetings. If we then compare this to one-person meetings, where it may be sort of a phone call or something, this is making up the same percentage of meetings as those larger 7 to 9 person ones. So overall, what we're seeing is that over half of meetings are under 6 people. And for most organizations, this isn't reflected in the way that space has been fit out or allocated. The next area which often sparks conversation is the usage around work points. We found that in the last 6 months, 44.3% of desks are used for less than an hour. What we can deduce from this global data is that most companies are over-catering when it comes to workstations when compared to their actual usage. When we start to consider the actual utilisation more than just the number of employees that are expected in that office location, for example, this can start to focus a conversation onto the ways that employees are interacting with the space, and therefore teams can adapt the workplace as needed. So all of this culminates into the following 2 situations, which we've seen commonly play out, especially over the course of the working week. So Monday and Friday might look a little bit like what you see on the left there, whereas Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday might start to look a little bit more like the right. So those days with low utilisation can start to feel like a bit of a ghost town on those Mondays and Fridays. So you might have gone into work because you prefer to work within a professional setting or around your peers, but in reality, there is no one there at work. So there may be one other person, you might recognise over the side of the office, but you don't really know that many people there. So it's a lot of options for workstations and even more for meeting rooms on these days, but very few actual in-person or peer-to-peer conversations, as you might expect after sort of making that trek in. The opposite, which is what we're seeing on the right there, is where we're seeing high utilisation in the workplace. So like those midweek days, those Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays. This is where, you may have crammed yourself onto an express train, maybe it's the 801, forgotten to pack your lunch, and then you get into the office and you're not sure where you're going to sit. So it's starting to sort of have that mental fatigue on your brain. You then might get in and try and find a spot near your team. Maybe the only free one is something with a broken chair, or it's halfway across the building or something. But this starts to make the aim of collaboration a little bit more challenging and creates those friction points as we start to get into the office. As more organizations opt for hybrid working options, the data indicates that this stark difference in workplace continues to play out. So for workplace teams, this can pose a very tricky question of how to manage the difference between these types of days, especially when considering employee satisfaction, adequate facilities, and wasted resources around building management as well. Now, we understand that this doesn't happen overnight when trying to resolve these friction points. So what we've done with workplace, property, and facilities teams is to leverage live data to enable smarter, more dynamic buildings. This is through using a workplace maturity curve where you can sort of crawl, walk, and run towards a dynamic, smart-enabled workplace, which can actually adapt to the realities of hybrid work. All right, so let's start with crawl. The starting point here is to really understand your space. I'll just pop to the next slide, thanks. So to begin understanding your space, it's critical to understand behaviour. Being able to have an understanding of the way that people are actually interacting with your space is the most important part of creating a workplace which can adequately respond to the needs of employees. This involves collecting data and recognising what blind spots you might have as well. An example of this, of where we've seen this, is in actual meeting room usage compared to expected usage. So you may have, say, booking data, but without that live data to collect these analytics, there's no actual way to know what that actual utilisation was of those spaces. So to start here, we recommend having accurate data, which is easily collatable, and provides insights for the way employees are interacting with space in reality. Then we recommend prioritizing based on the opportunities available to create those impactful changes. This brings us to the next section of walk. So to walk, this is where we're starting to look into more tangible changes that workplaces can start to make, which alleviate those friction points, which we've seen in the workplace, as we spoke about before. So once you have data, we recommend looking at this on a building level to create a true snapshot of what floors are the busiest and where the most bottlenecks are likely to be. So in this example, we can see that we look at our live view and we can see that level 9 is the busiest, and verify this in the trend data as well. So once we've identified the busiest level, we can actually start to look into the more specific data around space types available and the most in use on the floor. So as you can see here, we've selected 3 examples of these spaces. So work points, club spaces, and meeting rooms. If we focus first on the work points, you can see that peak usage for this example is in the high 700s for work points. What that then shows is that there are 687 work points which are unused over this period of time. We can then compare that to meeting room usage, where you can see that meeting rooms pretty much are used to their capacity. So you can see here at its peak, 42 meeting rooms were in use, leaving only 8 available during that point in time. So what we can deduce from that is that there is an over-catering of work points when compared to meeting rooms, and the usage around these meeting rooms is likely to be a significant bottleneck for this company, for example, comparatively to work point availability. So they could comfortably remove work points when they are starting to see the impact of those bottlenecks. The next comparison then is for collaboration spaces to meeting rooms. We've heard sort of many times with companies where they're often designing and opting for open collaboration spaces almost as an option other than a meeting room. However, when we look at the data in this example, there's a significant underutilization of these spaces. So here you can see of a total of 42 collaboration spaces, there's only 24 in use at any period of time. So when we compare this to meeting rooms, the actual percentage utilization compared to space is significantly different. This would be a key area if we were to work with a customer where we would look to change their space allocations to promote greater usage of those collaboration spaces or opt for sort of more traditional meeting rooms. Awesome. So if we actually take a closer look here as well, specifically with meeting rooms, you can see that for these meeting rooms, there's an average of 2.8 people per meeting, with 87% of meetings containing 4 or less people. This provides some practical alterations you can start to make where more 1 to 4 person meeting spaces would actually adequately provide the facilities needed for the high majority of customers for this customer's demands in this specific instance. Awesome. So here are some ways that we've seen this put into practice in terms of using that data. In the first instance, we worked with a customer that was seeing high usage of meeting spaces with very low average fullness. So, a lot of people on single phone calls, those sorts of things. As a result, they added more single person phone booths to alleviate this friction point for them. This helped with noise concerns that they had as well as alleviating that strain on larger meeting rooms. Similarly, for the sort of in that second instance, a customer used data to help inform a scheduled transition between office spaces where they were moving into a new building. The data they were able to see meant that they could allocate more teams to the building than originally planned, which then helped with overall usage of that space. Finally, in that third instance, we also had a customer who leveraged that live data capability to provide live kiosk displays to show the number of meeting spaces available on each floor and the ones above and below that floor, which then allowed employees to be a bit more empowered in terms of making those informed decisions and also reduce that friction point of available meeting rooms. So yeah, these are just some of those instances where small data-informed shifts can have a significant impact in alleviating some of those tension points we spoke about earlier. Awesome. So the final one here on the maturity curve is to run. So here we suggest that workplace systems are built to adjust to these flux times. This is where we can really start to see what a dynamic workplace looks like. And we're adjusting for efficiency on those more quiet days, so like the Monday and Fridays, but we're also addressing those friction points that we're seeing on those peak days, such as the Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. And that's through actively using the data by integrating and building systems which enable effective workplace management. So to create a dynamic workplace and proactively build out that strategy moving forwards, this is where we recommend looking into where you can start to optimize and enable. So this is where we can respond to that flux in peak versus quiet utilization and have the tools to effectively respond to new requirements as they arise. So for instance, where available, companies have integrated XYSense live data into their building management systems to help control HVAC systems, for instance. As a result, these customers have unlocked cost-saving opportunities and ESG benefits because the building operates to reflect its real-time usage. Another example is through cleaning scheduling. So for example, where a company sees 20% utilization for one floor each Friday, for example, they could look to limit the floors that they open and available hot desks for those days and alter their cleaning scheduling based on that usage. And the other benefit here is that it means that all those other resources to operate a floor, such as lighting and HVAC, can also be tailored to that usage. So here, these are just some of the ways that live utilization data can assist in creating that smart building. So finally, to summarize, optimizing your workplace is a bit of a journey. We know that it doesn't all happen in a day, but there are things that you can do now that start or help to propel you along this journey to enable you to crawl, run, and walk towards an effective workplace strategy.
Thanks, Rebecca W. It's interesting to hear your crawl, walk, run process for tenants. So at LPC, to achieve the right utilisation, we focus on securing the right location, right premises, and right terms, which ensure tenant-friendly terms that future-proof your lease. To deliver the right location, right premises, and right terms, we implement a four-step process which encompasses, amongst other elements, the leasing considerations and opportunities.
So I'll start off by discussing the discovery phase. Many of our clients will provide us with security card access data for utilisation. This doesn't provide information around individual work point or meeting room utilisation. And we often have to resort to the old-fashioned scenario of walking the floor on the hour to gather that information, which is usually a very small window of time and can be affected by seasonality, for instance, school holidays or the end of the financial year. The quality of the information that can be drawn from a solution like XYSense, which isn't just a defined point in time, makes this process so much more evidence-based rather than speculating. Next, let's just talk about briefly define. So this is where we frame the real need. We review performance, for example, from the utilisation data. We look at the location relevance and the workforce demographics, and we test the market to understand what options are available. This gives us a clear picture of demand matched to option. Adrian?
So thanks, Rebecca. The third stage is the develop option. So we identify, test, and leverage different scenarios, whether that's consolidating, resizing, relocating, or reconfiguring space. Each option is evaluated, ranked, and stress tested against agreed business criteria. So decision-making is evidence-based, not just performance-driven. Finally, we move to deliver. Here we provide a clear strategy with a recommended pathway, costings, and an implementation plan. In other words, we take uncertainty and replace it with clarity, direction, and confidence in the next steps. The outcome of this is a four-step process and is what we call being able to future-proof today, helping businesses act decisively in the present with confidence that the strategy will stand up tomorrow. Next slide, please. So when utilisation is low or inconsistent with business needs, the next big question for any organisation is whether to stay in the current premises or move to new ones. Both scenarios come with pros and cons, and we approach them with the same discipline framework, reviewing lease factors, workplace needs, and business priorities. while always focusing on the 5 core considerations in the middle of the 2 diagrams: cost, risk, flexibility, obligations, and guarantees. If you decide to stay in your current premises, the lease discussion often centres on whether you can contract space with the landlord, including assignment or sublease, what rent reductions or incentives are available, and how much the landlord will contribute towards refurbishment works. We also consider alignment with your remaining lease term and whether additional swing space is required while works are being carried out.
Also on the workplace components or considerations is that staying might trigger approvals, building permits or upgrades to base building services. We like to assess how disruptive these works will be to staff and whether security, access and business continuity can be maintained while reconfigurations are underway.
If you decide to relocate or consolidate to new premises, we're evaluating the availability of suitably sized space in preferred locations, leveraging the competitiveness of market rents, and what incentives or favourable terms can be achieved in a new lease. We also weigh up landlord incentives that can offset costs, as well as make good obligations on the current premises. It's also important to note that even if your strategy is to stay in the current premises, by not leveraging the market using a representative like LPC, you are probably leaving increased incentives, flexibility, and landlord obligations off the table.
From a workplace perspective, relocation gives the opportunity to design an optimised workplace from scratch using evidence-based design, but it also introduces risks around how long it would take to design and build the fit out to ensure alignment with the lease expiry dates. We also ensure new premises meet building quality standards, service requirements, and compliance with ESG targets.
So regardless of whether a client chooses to stay or go, our role is to cut through the complexity and bring clarity by measuring each option against the 5 focus areas: cost, risk, flexibility, obligation, and guarantees. That way, the decision is grounded in evidence and strategy, not just circumstance.
Well, I think we're back to, we come to the Q&A session, and thanks for that to the presenters. We've got a good time slot for Q&A, so I'll swap between, there's some questions here which would, if I read them, they're directed at to XY Sense, and there's others directed at LPC, so I'll alternate between the two. The first question is directed to XY Sense, and I'll summarize. You mentioned during the presentation that XY Sense data is anonymous. How do you achieve that?
Yeah, absolutely. So all of the data that we collect is plotted on an XY coordinate. So when our sensor detects sort of presence there, it's plotted on an XY sense coordinate. So there's no sort of individual data that's captured, and that's how we can understand how people are using the space there as well. Thank you.
And thumbs up in the answer there. And just remind you, if you can still record questions in the chat. So this one I think would be for LPC, possibly Adrian and Rebecca P. How do landlords typically respond to requests for more flexible lease terms based on utilisation data?
I guess now, based on the vacancy rates in the major cities, landlords have to. So things like early break provisions, handing back of floors during the lease term, more favourable subleasing clauses, these are all now commonplace and part of an everyday lease negotiation. With stay options, landlords are very keen to retain their tenants. So using the utilisation data to paint the picture of an issue is really welcomed. And landlords will most of the time work with the tenant to come up with a workable solution.
And I think it's fair to say, Adrian, if we are surrendering space, and the opportunity is to refurbish to meet the changes to the workplace, a lot of the landlords are also providing funding to that.
Correct. Yep.
Just a comment, asking for additional comment potentially is they do say in negotiations that information is power. So this question about utilisation data, I'm assuming from what you said, Adrian, that utilisation data enables the lessee to get to a better negotiation endpoint. Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely. And if you look at the barometer that we had in the early part of the presentation, so, the landlord side do hold a lot more information, and by holding that information, they hold more power. So the more data that you can bring to a negotiation, the better a better position you have as a tenant. So absolutely. And it does also quite often very logically explains the problem that you're trying to solve to the landlord, and brings the landlord into discussion to work collaboratively to achieve the outcome.
This is the next question is quite a practical one, directed primarily at Rebecca W. But just listen to what Rebecca P. and Adrian have said. I think you folk would also have comment here. So, Rebecca W., have you actually seen workplace data influence design? I guess the question could say, have you seen it influence design that benefits the tenant? Probably, I would add.
Yeah, definitely. We've worked with a few customers who have been able to use that data to help influence design. So for instance, with a kind of Australian telco company, we've been able to work with them, and they've actually used that data to then inform their next office location. So taking all that existing data they've sort of been able to collect over a long time, and they've sort of been with us for upwards of 6-7 years or so. And so using that data, they're able to either take that to sort of designers or architects to then inform the needs that they have. And so often that can be really practical, such as, meeting room sizing, even to being able to right size for the specific teams that they have. So, we know that sales teams might have different requirements to accounting teams, for instance. So, where you've got sales teams, you might have more phone booths, meeting rooms, because they're often in a more conversational role compared to perhaps, a finance team that might need more specific things around their desk. So all of those tools and all those levers, we've definitely seen help enable better workplace design, but also I'm sure in terms of then talking to landlords, then having that data to then back it up in terms of their needs. As Adrian and Rebecca P mentioned, it's been very helpful for them.
Thank you, Rebecca. Quite a fulsome answer, but Adrian and Rebecca P, any further comment on that?
Oh, absolutely. From my experience, one of the challenges when you are trying to reposition a workplace or move to a new is to actually get the mix of spaces right. And I think, Rebecca W., we were discussing it, collecting the data through XY Sense. It's not just about the data as it is now, but it's about looking at how it can adapt to the future. So we have to design workspaces to allow for the size of the length of the lease. And so having good evidence-based information and then using that as a starting point, but then also considering how we can adapt and flex those spaces should there be changes in that data is really important. So I'm, I much prefer to be able to develop a workplace strategy or a space budget using data than having to sort of hypothesize around what we think people really want to use.
Something came through in the chat. Sorry, Adrian.
No, you go, John. Yep.
Something came through on the chat here, which I think is a comment, and it possibly I'll read it to you. So as well as using it being, I think, the utilization data, and I think the point is to make tweaks to certain spaces. So I think the word tweaks is important here, I think, to make tweaks to certain spaces based on the utilization data to increase utilization of these spaces. So not necessarily wholesale change in design is the way I read that comment, but actually to make tweaks which enable you to get more out of your commitments to space and property. Any further comments on that?
I think that was your crawl or walk, wasn't it, Rebecca W.?
Yeah, absolutely. So in terms of sort of being able to make those tweaks, it is that kind of low-hanging fruit where, you can make those small changes, which then create that difference for utilization. I think in this instance, Sarah might be sort of referring to a few meeting room changes. So for example, there might be concerns that, some meeting rooms are more in use versus others, and it's around how is that meeting room perhaps designed, or even the technology that's in those meeting rooms.
Or the furniture.
Exactly, yeah. Having access to those information points can then open the door to understand deeper what are those tension points and those friction points that your employees are actually seeing. Because if there is one room or sort of one desk that has very low utilization, it really allows for that conversation to play out where you can sit in that desk and you can see, oh yeah, there's no keyboard, there's no mouse, the screen's always funny, the chair's a bit uncomfortable, those sorts of things. Which don't necessarily get reported or sort of surfaced up for facilities teams or workplace teams, but can really make that practical difference just in terms of, yeah, we don't actually need X number more meeting rooms or whatever it is. It's how are we looking at those spaces and using the data to help inform those conversations as well.
So I think, Rebecca, we were talking earlier about piloting. So we've definitely worked with clients in the past where we've piloted a number of different furniture settings, so different types of furniture. And then through observing the data, we can see on the pilot floor the spaces that are utilized more, or the work settings or types of meeting rooms. And then for the whole project, then rolling out that piloting information for the subsequent floors to make sure that we've fine-tuned it and we've got the mix right.
Yeah, exactly. And it's one of those things that it's that evolving conversation as well. Like you can sort of understand from a furniture perspective, you know, what's more popular, what's been less used, but also giving that information back to employees, I think is a really interesting point where when employees feel a little bit more empowered to have access to that information, because you know they want to be able to find that meeting room within 2 minutes of their meeting as well, instead of sort of necessarily having to raise that every single time. Having that exchange in information and sort of enabling people to make those smart choices as well, then results in better utilization overall, as well as sort of reducing those friction points for most people.
I think also it's interesting with the floor plates. Sometimes this doesn't get considered, but what you can see from this kind of quality of utilization data is that there are locations on the floor that are preferred because they might be closer to daylight. There might be, so it's not just a furniture setting or a meeting room type, it's actually where on the floor. And so you might get, you know, work points that are closer to daylight, or you know, kitchen facilities that might either be closer to the daylight or they might be further away from kitchen facilities. So, you know, an open plan kitchenette might be noisier, and you'll see that staff will choose those points last. And so you maybe, you know, if we're doing this as a pilot, you would build enclosed kitchenette points so that they're not impacting the noise for the work points adjacent. You know, there's lots of nuances that you can gather from looking at the data that can help inform, you know, good design.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's also like anticipating those needs, so seeing them in real time, and then, as you said before, future-proofing for those needs, and using that data, definitely.
There were a few thumbs up along the way in that discussion, and so I think, and thanks for, if I may just say, for Sarah for the comment, very helpful. And I think about to summarize is everybody's looking for improved utilization that doesn't require boardroom approval of a capital expenditure. And that's sort of, I think some of the discussion that's just been had now is in that space. The next one is primarily, I think it's picking up on, Adrian, you used the term future-proof today, which we use at LPC, making decisions today for the future. And so Rebecca W. used the expression, we see. This question is actually looking more into the future and saying how will utilization trends affect the future of commercial real estate in Australia and New Zealand? Probably you to kick off, I would think, Adrian. So looking ahead into the future and the emphasis being on trends, what we know where we are now, but what should the planning be looking ahead into the future?
Well, I think we're already seeing that, aren't we? That you know, utilization is such a big thing for occupiers, and I think with having you know, the access to data that the XY Sense provides, is that it's going to be much more a part of negotiations. It's going to be providing that data to really inform the landlords of what's required. And I think, you know, with you know, a lot of strain on costs at the moment, really wanting to make sure that occupiers have got the space that works for them now and also into the future. is one of the key considerations when deciding your lease strategy.
So are you meaning flexibility as in handing back floors or taking up extra floors or?
Well, just knowing what, I guess, yes, well, that's part of it, but also making sure that you don't enter a space from day one or very early in your lease that is not going to fit the business needs. And it gets back to what we said earlier about business before space. So really trying to understand the business and understand how the business needs to utilise the space, but having that flexibility during the lease term.
There's two related questions, which again are practical. The one is aimed at Rebecca W. And it says, have you seen a customer use data to right size or to improve utilization? You did give some examples, but I think this question is asking for further practical examples if possible. And then the second is related to that, but it's broader. It's a real estate question really, and it's some insights into the improved utilization or optimization of workplace that customers have achieved during the pandemic and post the, if we can call where we're in now, post the pandemic. You know, some indications of the have customers really benefited and what achievements have they been able to win, if I can use that word. So I think first of all, Rebecca W, any further practical examples?
Yeah, we've sort of seen customers be able to renegotiate their leases based on the data. As I said before, that has involved right sizing as well. So some of our customers who've been with us for sort of 6-7 years have been able to look at their global portfolio and reduce space where needed. I think that reflects both flux in terms of number of people maybe allocated to their office, but also based on the data, they're able to actually look at the amount of space they need in reality and adjust that so that they have that almost bargaining chip when it comes to those negotiations, to know that they can fit the number of people they need in for the utilization that they have and right size that based on their needs when they do then go into those negotiations around leasing.
Adrian, anything? Rebecca, Adrian?
No.
Good. No. Well, I think that comes to the end of the question.
I think there were a couple more in the Q&A, John.
Oh, there are?
Yep.
And I'm not seeing them, so maybe help me out.
So I think there was a question around, so I can pose them. So I think this one was for Rebecca W. It might be something we take offline, but what's the cost per square meter or per desk to scale XY Sense across the national portfolio, and maybe you can answer this one, where do clients usually see savings?
Yeah, definitely. If there is interest in terms of understanding costs, happy to kind of take that offline. Feel free to reach out to me. I think there's a QR code at the end there, or actually it's on the screen right now. So yeah, feel free to reach out. In terms of where clients usually see these savings, I think it's sort of twofold. Like I think there's the savings that you can get from being able to either adjust your building management aspect. So looking at HVAC savings, cleaning savings, lighting, all of those resources which come into sort of make a building like that tick. All of those things, when you do know what the actual utilization is like, can be then tweaked. I know for some companies that's different in terms of what they've got access to in terms of, say, those building management systems. But even just things like cleaning scheduling, where if you know, as I said before, you know, there's low utilization on Fridays consistently, looking at that workplace strategy in terms of how you can change behavior as well, and slowly sort of encourage people to look at how they're using the space and how they're using the building, so that you can maximize those floors which you want really busy, and then maybe even look to shut down other floors where it is a little bit more quiet. And then that way, obviously, you're saving in terms of you don't have to clean those floors then, you don't have to power them, light them, HVAC systems, all of that. There's no point having kind of fresh air pumping into an empty floor. And so really condensing and consolidating that's sort of part of our whole crawl, run and walk idea where, you know, those 3 days maximizing that usage, and then those 2 days looking at how we can start to have those savings and conserve those savings. So that's the first part in terms of those savings. The second part then is obviously in right sizing and understanding for your floor what you need. And that's when, you know, the likes of LPC, that's when you've got that skill set there to then start negotiating based on that usage, what space you need. Because I think the key thing is to have that knowledge and to have something to base that discussion on. So those are the two sort of ways that we've seen a lot of those savings.
Thank you. Yeah, and I only had the chat open, so I see what you're talking about, Adrian.
Yep.
And so the other question there is, in a hybrid era where office utilization is under increasing scrutiny, we often see that vertically connected workspaces through interconnecting stairs can dramatically influence collaboration, culture, and even long-term return on investment for tenants. From your perspectives, plural, how should tenant advisors be framing the value of investing in vertical connectivity with their clients at the leasing stage? And how can real-time utilization data, such as that from XYSense, help measure and justify this investment throughout the lease cycle?
I can probably start on that one. So, yeah, I think we sort of touched on it before that, you know, for an example might be for a stay tenant, you know, to engage with the landlord and really leverage that collaboration and culture piece. You know, if for example, if they were over 2 floors and there's not that collaboration opportunity, then that's a real discussion with the landlord to say, well, look, if you can invest in connecting us more as a workplace, you know, that might be a key decision maker in providing us with that flexibility, in assisting us with the cost, and being a real key part of whether to stay in that location or not. We are also seeing landlords that are I guess, acknowledging the need for collaboration. There's a new development currently underway in Melbourne, and the landlord has actually created a void across 2 floors that could cater for a staircase to be installed, which would really be yeah, a really good example of that collaboration there. So landlords are more aware of it. And so it's absolutely something that could be used in lease negotiations.
Thank you.
Rebecca, W, I don't know. I mean,
Yeah, you know,
of course, the data can be used, and I think it can, you know, also, you know, having that data to be able to go to a landlord and, as I've said a couple of times, here's the problem that we've got. We've got, you know, the use of more collaborations spaces, or we're in meeting rooms too much and can't collaborate, so we need more connectivity between within the workplace. That would be a way of being able to assist the conversation there.
Yeah, definitely. And I think understanding almost people's movement around that space. We actually have a feature called replays, and what that enables is for our customers to see how are people moving through that space. So when you combine that with something like a vertical staircase in between 2 floors, and you can see, you know, are people sticking around those areas? Is the usage around that area through our sort of heat map views, is that increased compared to, say, something further away from the staircase? Or, you know, you might have another floor in addition to that, where you can then have that direct comparison. A lot of that's reflected in the data when you actually start to understand how are people moving through your space. And that's almost like that crawl section where it's, you know, what's the behavior like of your employees? Because then you can start to pose those questions back to the data or back to sort of a replays feature or heat maps, which then can start to enable those insights to help justify those discussion points there.
And just a comment from one of our attendees on that topic, vertical connectivity gives visual connection with colleagues as you move through spaces and helps create those casual collisions.
Absolutely.
Well, I think that might be a good place to end off, unless anybody wants to stop me from ending off. And I think it's up to me to thank everybody for attending. Very pertinent topic. I go back to Rebecca P's words in the beginning, Steve Jobs, that you've got to understand a problem before you deal with solutions. And so thank you to the presenters for giving us an understanding of the utilization gap, what the problem is, what the drivers are, and what can be done to improve utilization and from our perspective, in a broader real estate perspective, to improve your return on investment on the money you put into your spaces. So thank you for attending, and we'll catch you next time. And the emails are there, the QR codes are there. That's it for today. Goodbye.